Human settlements have always been built near to valuable natural resources, or where there may be opportunities to make a fortune. But when the fortunes run out, there's often very little to keep people living there. As a result, there are countless places around the world that for various reasons have been abandoned. Join me, we're counting down the top 15 most scary ghost towns in the world. Starting with number 15, the Burgealabas, Turkey. Property developers are having to be increasingly inventive if they want to build large-scale residential properties that'll make them a fortune. And if they don't get things just right, it can prove to be catastrophic. That's exactly what happened with Burgealabas in Turkey, which has become the most unusual modern-day ghost town in the world. Located in the region of Bolu, roughly midway between Istanbul and Ankara, this ambitious project was conceived to cater to affluent buyers seeking luxury homes in a fairy tale setting. Each one of the villas of Burgealabas is designed to resemble a miniature castle complete with a Gothic-style tower, ornate details, and it gives the owner the chance to live inside their very own storybook. The development funded by the Saro Group aimed to construct over 700 of these castle homes alongside high-end facilities such as spas, indoor swimming pools, Turkish baths, and other luxury amenities. The target market included wealthy investors from the Middle East and Gulf countries, with the project relying on the appeal of owning a personal castle in the scenic Turkish countryside. But by 2018, though, after completing a number of the villas, the project hit financial issues. The developers declared bankruptcy, mainly because they weren't able to sell as many units as they hoped. The result was a ghost town of unfinished, unoccupied castles, creating one of the most surreal landscapes on Earth. Today, with rows of identical uninhabited castles set against a stunning backdrop, the Burgealabas continues to fall into a state of disrepair, and hopes of salvaging the site are now long gone. Number 14. Terlingua, Texas. Terlingua, Texas. It's in the Chihuahuan Desert near the Mexico-Texas border, and it was once a thriving mercury mining community in the early 20th. The fortunes of the region began in the late 1800s with the discovery of cinnabar, from which mercury is extracted, and this led to a booming mining industry. By the mid-1940s, however, demand for mercury declined, and this led to the closure of the mines and subsequently the gradual abandonment of the town. The remnants of this period, such as ruined buildings, mining equipment, and deserted homes, are still standing and have become a haunting reminder of Terlingua's past. Despite being known as a ghost town, Terlingua has actually experienced somewhat of a revival in recent decades. It's now also famous for its annual chili cook-off, which started in 1967. The town is also a gateway to outdoor adventures located near Big Bend National Park and Big Bend Ranch State Park, offering opportunities for hiking, river rafting, biking, and stargazing. The small community that lives there today is a tight-knit, eclectic mix of locals and newcomers, all drawn by the allure of the desert's beauty and the town's laid-back, off-the-grid lifestyle. But despite this resurgence, it's still just a shadow of its former heyday. Number 13. Kco Italy. The commune of Kco in Italy is sat atop a hill in the region of Basilicata, and it's thought to have been originally founded around 2,800 years ago. Once a focal point in the region with as many as 2,000 residents, it now lies completely abandoned and has become a tourist attraction in its own right. Despite lasting for thousands of years, the town's decline began in the 20th century following a series of natural disasters. Landslides, floods, and earthquakes gradually undermined the stability of its hillside foundation, and by the 1980s, faulty pipe work is thought to have caused a particularly destructive landslide. Now it's full of stone buildings, narrow streets, and silent bell towers that reach towards the sky. Kco isn't just special because of its ghostly appearance, but also in the way it acts as a historic monument and the power of the environment. The town's location provided strategic defensive advantages and sweeping views of the surrounding valleys, which for centuries sustained its people and their way of life. But more recently, it was this exact position that led to the town's downfall. Today, for as well as tourists, Kco is a popular site for filmmakers and photographers, and it served as a dramatic backdrop for a number of movies. Preservation efforts and guided tours have been introduced to safeguard its structures and protect it for future generations, with it now being on the watch list of the World's Monument Fund, which aims to help save places like this. Number 12. Tun Chang China. In an attempt to encourage people and investors to move to the country, Chinese officials embarked on a project to recreate some of the world's most famous cities and landmarks as new residential zones. And while some of these proved to be successful, there were others that failed to gain the interest they had expected. One of these was Tianducheng, which is in the suburbs of Hangzhou, Zhejiang Province, And at first, thanks to its skyline, it looks sort of like the center of Paris, complete with its own Eiffel Tower standing about one-third the height of the original. This place officially opened in 2007, but still has an eerily empty feel about it. Beyond the central tower, it's got European-style architecture, including replicas of Parisian buildings, fountains, and gardens that aim to mirror the aesthetic and atmosphere of the French capital. The development covers an area of around 12 square miles and was designed to accommodate more than 10,000 residents. To begin with, it faced huge criticism and skepticism, with media outlets and visitors often calling it a ghost town due to its slow start in attracting residents and the surreal emptiness of its meticulously designed streets and public spaces. Things have since turned around slightly, but even today there's now just a fraction of the number of people living there that it was designed for, so you can easily walk through the streets without seeing a single other person. Even if you do see someone, the chances are it's a tourist who has visited to get photos of the replica of the Eiffel Tower and the other buildings before going back home. Number 11. Colemanskop, Namibia. Colemanskop in Namibia is located in the Namib Desert, just a few miles inland from the port town of Lüderitz. Despite there being other settlements fairly close by, Colemanskop itself was built in the early 20th during the diamond rush that swept through this part of Africa. Once a hugely busy place with miners flocking to it in hopes of their fortune and a wider community developing around the lucrative diamond trade, today it's nothing more than a ghost town and a reminder of how quickly fortunes can fade. The town reached its peak in the 1920s, and at the time it was equipped with modern amenities that were a rarity in southern Africa at the time, including the first X-ray station in the southern hemisphere, a swimming pool, a ballroom, and even an ice factory. Colemanskop was the symbol of luxury and wealth in the desert, a place where diamonds were so abundant they could be found glittering in the sand under the moonlight. By the 1930s, though, the diamond fields started to deplete, and richer deposits were discovered further south. By 1954, the town was completely abandoned, with everyone having left to seek their fortunes elsewhere, and the buildings were left to the mercy of the desert. The sands began to reclaim the land, filling the houses and buildings and slowly eradicating any sign that such a community once existed. Today, it's a popular tourist destination, with visitors gaining a glimpse into the historic place through its half-submerged ruins. You can walk through houses knee-deep in sand, explore abandoned workshops, and see the preserved homes, some of which still have products from the time on the shelves. It's a fascinating example of how the discovery of valuable deposits can suddenly change the face of a region, and how quickly this can all be undone once the source of that prosperity has vanished. Number 10. Arltunga, Australia. Nestled within the remote landscape of the East MacDonald Ranges in the Northern Territory of Australia is the town of Arltunga, which is now part of a protected historical reserve. It was established in 1887 following the discovery of alluvial gold by prospectors, and was the first official town to be recognized in Central Australia, marking the beginning of the region's mining. In its heyday, Arltunga was a bustling community, albeit small, with miners enduring the extreme desert conditions in hope of striking it rich. The gold rush attracted a diverse group of people, including prospectors, entrepreneurs, and adventurers, all drawn by the dream of finding a huge deposit of this precious metal. The town featured essential services such as a police station, post office, hotels, and stores, alongside mining operations scattered throughout the surrounding area. Life in Arltunga was, though, not for the faint of heart. The remote location meant that supplies had to be transported over long distances through challenging terrain, making everyday survival a bit of a challenge. Water was scarce, and the intense heat and isolation tested the resilience of even the hardiest of the town's inhabitants. Despite these difficulties, the community thrived for a while, with gold mining shaping the region's social and economic landscape. As time passed and the gold reserves dwindled, so did the town's population, leading to its gradual abandonment. By the early 20th century, Arltunga was left to the elements, and its buildings slowly began to decay. Exploring the site today, though, visitors can walk through the ruins of old mines, see the remains of stone buildings, and learn about the techniques miners use to extract gold from the land. You also get a first-hand experience of just how harsh an environment it was for them, and why, the moment the gold was gone, they left for somewhere else. Number 9. Kenot, Alaska. Found in the heart of the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve is the town of Kenot, Alaska, which was a remote mining camp that had been set up to support operations at one of the richest copper mines in the world. Large deposits of copper ore were discovered in the area in the late 19th century, and this led to the creation of the Kenot Mining Corporation in 1903, which undertook the task of extracting and processing the ore, a project that required innovative solutions to overcome the challenges. These included the construction of the Copper River and Northwestern Railway, which connected Kennecott to the port of Cordova, 196 miles away, and it eased the transport of copper ore to markets beyond Alaska. At its peak, Kennecott was a bustling community of miners and their families, with a fully operational mill town that included a hospital, general store, schoolhouse, and recreational facilities. The mines produced copper ore valued at over $200 million, which was a huge amount for the time, and helped to fuel the electrical and industrial boom in the United States. Mining operations were, though, extremely efficient, and what was once the largest known deposit of copper in the world was, by the late 1930s, largely depleted, and the cost of continuing operations far outweighed the profits that could be achieved. The Great Depression further lowered the demand for copper, leading to the closure of the mines in 1938, and without them to support the miners and the business that relied on them, Kennecott quickly became a ghost town. Today, it's a designated National Historic Landmark, and it's been preserved as part of the largest national park in the United States. Visitors can explore the well-preserved buildings and the machinery to see what it was like for those who worked in this isolated but vibrant mining community. The iconic Red Mill building, towering against the backdrop, is particularly impressive, and to many, is the visual legacy of the town that once was. Number 8. Jerat Alhamra, United Arab Emirates. Jerat Alhamra, often known simply as the ghost town of the United Arab Emirates, shows just how quickly things have changed in the region. Located in the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah, Jerat Alhamra is one of the best preserved coastal villages that once thrived on the Arabian Peninsula. This deserted town, whose name translates to mean Red Island in English, offers a rare insight into life in the UAE before the discovery of oil changed everything in the mid-20th century. Established in the 14th century, it was inhabited by the Za'ab tribe, who grew over centuries into a bustling community, relying primarily on pearl diving, fishing, and maritime trade. The town's architecture is a perfect example of traditional Gulf urban planning, featuring coral stone buildings, covered lanes, and houses with bargeal or wind towers, which are designed to provide natural air conditioning in the harsh climate. The 1960s marked the beginning of a mass departure from this place, though, as the residents left their homes to seek opportunities in the growing urban centers of the UAE. The town was gradually abandoned, leaving behind a ghost town, with its houses, mosques, and marketplace standing silent. Today, it's a unique historical site, attracting tourists, photographers, and filmmakers drawn by its atmosphere. The deserted streets lined with sand-filled houses offer a stark contrast to the UAE's modern cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, reminding visitors of the country's culture and history. So it's not lost forever. Preservation efforts have been put into place to protect and maintain this place as a cultural heritage site, providing valuable insights into the traditional Emirati way of life. The town now serves as a memory of the ancestral customs and architectural ingenuity of the region, and how in just 60 years communities have changed from what it was like there to the towering megastructures just a few miles away. Moving on to number 7, Ember Village, the UK. Ember Village, which is on the Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire, England, is an example of how changing times and needs can fundamentally change a community in a way that it can never recover. Originally a small farming community, which, according to records, dated back to almost 1,000 years ago, the town would be changed forever during the Second World War. In 1943, the British government requisitioned Ember in order to use the surrounding area as a training ground for the American troops who were preparing for the D-Day landings. The villagers were given just 47 days' warning to leave their homes, and while this was initially said to be a temporary measure, it soon became permanent and transformed Ember into a ghost town. Ember's location on Salisbury Plain, which is a vast area that was already used by the British Army for training exercises, made it an ideal site for these purposes. The promise was that the villagers could return after the war, but with the developing risks of the Cold War, the village continued being used as a military training site. Today, the village's empty buildings, including St. Giles Church that dates back to the 13th century, are preserved as part of the military training environment. Access to Ember is strictly controlled by the Ministry of Defense, with the public allowed to visit only on specific days of the year, usually around bank holidays and the Christmas period. Visiting this place, though, offers a sobering opportunity to see firsthand the impact of war on civilian communities and the complexities of balancing national security with individual rights. The village's isolation and eerie quietness of the deserted streets just reinforce this sense of loss, which is often now forgotten after so many years, when most of the damage has now long been repaired or rebuilt. Number 6. Chaien Chile. Chaien is a town in southern Chile that's a reminder of the powerful forces of nature, and how, when it was nearly obliterated by a volcanic eruption in May 2008, there was no choice for residents but to move away with the continuing risk of future events. Situated in the Los Lagos region, Chaien had been a quiet and picturesque town set along the coast near the mouth of the Yelcho River and surrounded by lush forests and the Andes Mountains. However, the Chaien volcano, which had been thought to have been dormant for thousands of years, awakened with little warning, and things changed forever. The eruption forced the evacuation of the town's inhabitants as ash clouds rose high into the atmosphere, spreading over vast areas of Patagonia, and a volcanic mudflow threatened to overrun what remained. In the immediate aftermath, the future of Chaien was uncertain, with the government initially declaring the town a loss and contemplating relocating the entire community permanently. However, the resilience of the Chaien residents and their attachment to their land sparked a debate about the town's future. Despite initial government reluctance, a combination of residents' determination to return and rebuild along with strategic interest in maintaining the town due to its location near a major highway connecting Chile to Argentina led to gradual efforts to restore this place. But later, flooding and uncertainty surrounding the volcano meant that the solution everyone eventually agreed upon was that the town would remain abandoned, and then it would be rebuilt several miles away in a safer position. The remains of the original town are still visible, though, and a frightening reminder of how dangerous the nearby volcano can be, even to the extent that the river that once flowed through it is now taking a different route and is wearing away at some of the structures that managed to survive the initial eruption. Number 5. Pyramidan, Norway. Pyramidan is an unusual town that's on the archipelago of Svalbard, which, while now part of Norway, found itself as a pawn in international diplomacy. It was originally founded by Sweden in 1910 to support the nearby coal mines, but as part of a peace deal, it was sold to the Soviet Union in 1927. Its ownership was then passed on to a state-owned Russian mining company, and at its peak, the town had more than 1,000 residents, with a cultural center, a theater, library, sports complex, and a primary school for the children. The town was named after the pyramid-shaped mountain that looms over it, and it was designed as a model community, showcasing the Soviet Union's vision of a utopian industrial society. As well as the basic facilities, it soon became known for having the world's northernmost statue of Lenin, the northernmost grand piano, and a cantina that served as a social hub for miners and their families. But while this was an ambitious attempt to replicate Soviet society on the island, it ultimately proved to be unsustainable. The coal deposits began to dwindle, and the economic viability of the mine came into question. This, combined with a series of accidents that made travel to the remote community, was increasingly difficult, meaning that by 1998 the mine was officially closed and the town was quickly abandoned, leaving behind the buildings, personal belongings, and everything else that couldn't be carried away. This has left Pyramidan a weird ghost town that's been preserved by the Arctic climate, and like a Soviet-era town that's been frozen in time. Visitors can explore the empty streets, enter the abandoned buildings, and even visit the world's northernmost grand piano in the cultural center, which has been silent for more than 2 decades. Still managed by the mining company, which continues to operate a coal mine in nearby Barentsburg, Pyramidan is slowly increasing in interest as a tourist destination. But with it being so far away from the mainland, it's quite the commitment to actually get there. Number 4. Hashima Island, Japan. Hashima Island, which is also known as Battleship Island, is an abandoned community that's around 9 miles from the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan. It gets its nickname because of a resemblance to a battleship, but the reason it's so well known is its link to rapid industrialization and the subsequent impact of changing economic fortunes on communities. The island began being developed in 1887 when Mitsubishi purchased it and began extracting a newly found deposit of coal from the seabed. By the mid-20th century, Hashima had become one of the most densely populated places on Earth, crammed with workers and their families living in high-rise residences. The island was a small representation of Japan's rapid economic growth, featuring apartment buildings, schools, a hospital, and recreational facilities, all surrounded by a seawall that protected it from the ocean. This prosperity wouldn't last forever, though, as in the 1960s, Japan began to transition from coal to petroleum as its primary energy source. This inevitably led to the mine's closure in 1974, and almost overnight, Hashima Island was abandoned. Buildings once full of life now stand empty, and as the decades have passed, have begun to decay with crumbling concrete and rusting steel in every direction, acting as a reminder of its industrial roots. In recent years, Hashima Island has captured the public's imagination, not just as a historical site, but also having been used as a setting for several blockbuster movies. It's now recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and while this legacy was largely celebrated, it's certainly an important site. Its links with wartime labor practices have left many thinking it should be forgotten about and allowed to wither away. Today, guided tours are available to allow visitors to get an idea of what life was like there for the people over the past century, and see firsthand how the changing demands of an economy can have such a major effect on communities like these. Number 3. Jimana, Romania. Jimana is another town that was once a village nestled in the valleys of Romania's Apuseni Mountains, but would see everything change when the needs of the wider economy took over. In the late 1970s, under Ceausescu's regime, the Romanian government discovered vast copper reserves nearby, and this led to the establishment of a copper mine, which was a project that promised great economic benefits, but at a detrimental environmental and social cost. To facilitate the mine's waste disposal needs, authorities decided to convert Jimana into a toxic tailings dump, and by 1978, residents were forced to leave their homes, receiving very little compensation in return, as the village was submerged under toxic sludge. Today, Jimana is a creepy sight, with only the church spire and a few rooftops peering above the vast murky waters of this toxic lake that has swamped the village. The water, which is saturated with heavy metals and chemicals, is a horrifying contrast to the natural beauty that once defined this area. With the toxic lake still in place, this is one ghost town that isn't exactly easy to explore, and there are concerns about the long-term health effects if you're near it for too long. Still, in recent years, it's attracted photographers, environmentalists, and the curious tourists drawn by its ghostly beauty and the tragic story behind what happened here. The site is now a powerful symbol of the need for sustainable development practices that consider the long-term impacts on communities and ecosystems, and it raises questions about the balance between economic development and environmental protection. Should the economic needs of a country really justify such destruction and devastation, particularly when residential space is in such short supply in many places? I don't think so. Number 2. Fordlandia, Brazil. American industrialist Henry Ford has, of course, gone down in history as being integral to the widespread adoption of motor vehicles around the world. But like every visionary businessman, he had his aims set a whole lot higher. In 1928, he acquired a site in the Amazon rainforest in Brazil and attempted to build his idea of a utopia, which he called Fordlandia. The reality behind it, though, was that this was also a way to secure a steady supply of rubber for Ford's automobile manufacturing empire. But as well as cultivating rubber, he tried to create a mini America in the Brazilian jungle with modern facilities, a school, a hospital, and even a golf course. The main vision behind it was to break the British and Dutch monopoly on rubber production and to revolutionize the industry by bringing it closer to home. Ford believed that by applying the principles of industrial efficiency and management, along with offering workers decent living conditions and wages, he could encourage economic success and social well-being. In the end, though, the reality of Fordlandia fell well short, with the project being beset by a series of technical and social challenges that ultimately led to its downfall. One of the biggest issues was the lack of local expertise in rubber cultivation. The rubber trees, which were planted in tight rows, became easy prey for pests and diseases in a way that they don't when they're naturally spread out. And along with this, the clash of cultures between the American administrators and Brazilian workers led to unrest and unhappiness, leading to continual problems. By 1945, with the Second World War reaching a conclusion, the world's economy had changed, and synthetic rubber alternatives were becoming viable. With its main purpose gone, Fordlandia was abandoned, leaving behind a bizarre American ghost town in the midst of the Amazon. The land was, however, given back to the Brazilian government, who gave some of the buildings to officials to live in, and to this day their descendants still call the town their home. Number 1. Centralia, Pennsylvania. Centralia is a place that once hosted a thriving community, but it's now also a reminder of the devastating consequences of human-made environmental disasters. It was originally built to support the workers of nearby coal mines, but things took a catastrophic turn in May of 1962 when a fire ignited in the mines. This fire, which was supposed to be a routine controlled burn at a landfill, accidentally spread through an unsealed opening into the extensive network of tunnels beneath the town. and fueled by the loose coal, began an unstoppable journey beneath Centralia, creating an inferno that would continue to burn for decades. Despite initial attempts to extinguish this fire, there were too many sources of fuel for it, so instead the town's residents had to evacuate as the toxic gases filled the air and sinkholes began to open up, which swallowed parts of the town. The underground fire created bizarre scenes with smoke billowing from cracks in the ground and the earth being warm to the touch, meaning you couldn't escape from the reminders of the disaster taking place below your feet. By the 1980s, the situation hadn't improved at all, and the government, recognizing the danger and impossibility of extinguishing the fire, allocated funds to relocate residents. Centralia's buildings were condemned and demolished, leaving behind a town that was effectively erased from the map. In 1992, the Pennsylvania authorities claimed all property in the town through eminent domain, and in 2002, its zip code was officially discontinued. Today, Centralia is an apocalyptic ghost town with only a few residents remaining, having refused to leave their homes despite the risks. The streets are mostly abandoned, with nature slowly reclaiming the land where homes and businesses once stood, and the few structures that remained are covered with warning signs and barricades, cautioning anyone who's curious enough to have made it that far. To this day, the fires continue to rage, with it expected to keep going on for hundreds of years, with the risk of collapsing tunnels and sinkholes developing at any moment. It's strictly off-limits for everyone, but that doesn't stop some people from taking the risk to see it for themselves. What they're confronted with is a preserved version of 1960s Americana, but one that feels like it's slowly being claimed by the flames of hell. The ground is warm to the touch, and there's a foul stench in the air that you can never quite escape, meaning that this is one ghost town that's definitely best left alone. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you to our channel members.